when Star Trek protests went digital. Right. Episode 297 of Trekland Tuesdays Live with me, Dr. Trek, Larry Nemecek, coming at you right from the heart of Trekland through Portal 47 for some clarity, sanity, and the big picture in all things Star Trek. Hey ho, everybody. Welcome back for another Tuesday. Got some history to talk about today. Hopefully a lot of fun. It all spurred over an anniversary that I posted about a few weeks ago. I'm going to get right to it, and I've got some photos here, actually like built into the system. So thank you, Patreon folks. The topic today came to me on the anniversary date. We pop up and I have fun with the socials with some of the anniversaries, especially if it's something that's personal to me or I have a personal angle on it. And this actually caused a little bit of discussion on Instagram. The 25th, back in 2005, so it's the 28th anniversary, there were sad days in Trek world because Enterprise on February 2nd, as people were kind of bracing, the optimists say never say die, but the realists and, well, inside folks knew already, but it was publicly announced on February 2nd that Enterprise was canceled once and for all. All the hopes and dreams of people keeping it alive, in-house anyway. The fourth season was not enough of a push. The change, the freshening of the blood was not enough to do it, basically because Les Moonves was tired of UPN, not just Enterprise and sci-fi, but was tired of UPN being kind of a failed experiment, partly because they starved it. They never promoted any UPN series on other networks or on other shows. It was starving. It was, and Star Trek in the middle of that was no longer the golden calf, with Moonves taking all the little rinky-dinky, the turnover of network little tin pot suits was over. Sadly, the WB and UPN had been out of the gate together, and the WB was actually growing. Now, eventually, UPN and WB became the CW. It still exists today, but UPN as an entity went away. It and its mix of wrestling and sci-fi and bad sitcoms. They kept canceling the shows they could have kept, and the ratings went down each year. Yeah, looking at you 7 days, a couple other ones that were pretty good. So that was the mood in 2005. But Star Trek fans, in their history, in their bones, in their DNA, back in the day, knew that the original series had been the original early cancellation, the original show on the bubble that fans saved. Well, they saved it for a third year, which got it to 100 reruns, episodes, which in the vibe of the day, the business plan of the day, was enough to syndicate the local stations, and the rest, as they say, is history. When they gave it to the kids after school and put it in the early hours on independent channels as an alternative to evening news or just after. And we don't know what happened. So the whole point was Star Trek was supposed to be on an eternal curve upward. How could anything like this happen? Well, some of it was splitting the market among stations at a time when people didn't know what the word binge watch means, and people were barely keeping up taping on their VCRs. 2005, DVR and digital recording was coming in, and very famously, as we've talked about, no one was paying attention to DVR statistics. Oh, it was a blow-off. Well, they're not watching the commercials, and all we care about is getting ad money for the commercials, the Nielsen's. What good does it do if somebody watches us later? Well, lots of people could see that happening, but it was too new. It was the exact same thing as the demographics for the original Star Trek were off the charts, but no one paid attention to demographics until a year or two later. And then famously, as Gene would say, they ran into the studio heads at NBC and Paramount and said, hey, we got your hit show right here according to the demos. All the kids are watching it. The people with the money to buy the consumer stuff that you're advertising on commercials. That's awesome. Who's the show? Star Trek. Oh, we canceled it last year. It was the exact same thing. But in 2005, that was not helping. Moonves was all about, and UPN was such a crippled little network. It wasn't even in a fourth of the country. And the channels it was on were the same fate that DS9 and Voyager suffered. They basically might as well have been syndicated. And the local hockey, the local NBA station would bump it to the evenings on game nights. The winter sports were murder on, Tuesdays and Wednesdays and Thursdays. So, yeah. So Enterprise was always down low, and then it was always the best rated show on UPN, but yeah, damning with faint praise. So it was canceled. I remember the word came down during filming of In a Mirror Darkly Part 2. Everybody had been so hopeful that they could turn things around. And the audience would say, why did you cancel it in the best season or in the big turnaround season? But the writing was on the wall. With that as a backdrop, fandom was not going to take it lying down. Fandom, with all the hallowed founding father stories of the Trimbles and the mail order campaign in 68 and Can Do, they jumped in to do it. And one guy in Tennessee, a guy named Tim Brazil, who was later cursed by many quarters, but in the beginning started a campaign, Save Star Trek. Now, this is 2005. Since the original Save campaign, fans had been protesting in lots of ways, right? There was the eternal 10-year get Star Trek back in any way. There were even the people, as we talked about on the Trek Files one week, Stab, whatever. They were protesting the animated series because they thought it was going to be the powers that be's cheap pat on the head to get Star Trek back. And they didn't want a cartoon. They wanted live action, a movie or TV series, which was strange. It's the same way people thought they would protest Discovery and get a better show when no, in 2017, you just lose Star Trek for another decade, dummies. Then there was also the protest. Remember the marketing protest against the Wrath of Khan when it leaked that Spock was dying? And there was the very professionally done marketing campaign that said your box office will suffer 25% and your merchandise will fall off the charts if you don't do something about not killing Spock. Okay, well, that looks crazy in hindsight, but that's an example of a rally, a protest campaign. Sometimes it seems counter to even having more Star Trek. There were people that, there was disgruntlement along the way over. The next one I really think about was killing off Kirk in Generations in 94, the Bring Back Kirk campaign. There was the campaign later on for Captain Sulu in the Excelsior. And those were starting to creep in, but what I'm saying here is 2005, to me, feels like the first time that Star Trek really went digital, really went viral with the protests. Now, it was a little old school because in some ways, there was a full-page ad taken out in the LA Times, Save Star Trek. But Tim Brazil in Tennessee sat down and got a team together and plotted what to do with this. And here's the thing. Rather than spreading in club newsletters, because this happened February 2nd. Well, within a few weeks, there was a rally planned for about March 15th to coincide over Creation's Grand Slam in Pasadena, which back in the day was the king of Star Trek conventions before Vegas was existing, but it hadn't hit its peak yet. Everybody's still focused on Pasadena because you got more people because they rolled out of bed and drove over. You got more actor guests that way. So that was the initial plan, but then it turned out that the finale was going to start filming on the 25th. So something in March was going to be too late to do anything if the sets were already being struck, much less folded and held. Fold and hold. So the rally date was moved up to the 25th. Eventually, people caught on to the idea, which was, if you don't think the money's there, we'll fund it. How much does a season of Enterprise cost? $30 million? That was the number that was thrown out there. So the drive started. Well, talk about David and Goliath. Talk about the uphill battle, Sisyphus. No way a crowdfund is going to, what do we even have now? $1.5 million, $2 million for the biggest crowdfunders out there. And this is 2005. So, but the most hopeful, optimistic people felt like they could do something, which is what you do when you empower a rally or protest. So eventually about 140,000 was direct raised. Kids, we're talking about years before crowdfunding. We're talking 2005. We're talking about Facebook was barely outside of college circles. My Facebook account goes back to 2007. My Twitter was a couple years later. You still had to download one act at a time on your dial-up modem if you wanted to see Star Trek New Voyages or Star Trek Exeter. You had forums. You had faster ways to communicate than seeing everybody at a con, passing them the word, your club newsletter on paper, your emailed club newsletter. But this is the first time that people really tried to climb the mountain using digital means. What also happened was This rally then was planned for February 25th, which turned out to be the opening day of shooting. Yes, 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 the infamous finale. Yeah, Trip is killed off. Troy and Riker take it over. Jonathan and Marina feel icky about it. These are the voyages, the Valentine to fans, the well-intentioned but totally misguided, misconceived thing that Brannon has done nothing but have an apology tour for 20 years over. That was the thing. So here you go. It's a rally. It's not confrontational. Actually planned to be set up outside the front gates of Paramount and protesting in collaboration. People know it's happening. There's the ad, and it's happening. So would you like, what's funny is I posted about this on Instagram the other day for the anniversary, and I had so many people say, whoa, I had no idea this happened. I had no idea this happened. Now, this is not the same as the Writers Guild strike just 2 years later, 2.5 years later. The 07-08 Writers Guild strike, when different theme picket days were picked up, and somebody said, let's do, after Ron Moore did the sci-fi one at Universal, someone said, well, let's do Star Trek. My God, how many writers over the years have worked on Star Trek? And then you have SAG, the actors, and even directors, and IATSE crew people, and the other unions, they have them sympathetically joining in on this strike, because whatever happens with the first one to strike, the others hopefully share in the bonus, especially if it's in a new paradigm. And this one was all about, residuals from new media, as new media was becoming a big deal, and people were just expected to write. I remember, never forget that, the Battlestar Galactica, Ron's Battlestar Galactica, with the new cool online mini programs that people just were expected to write. Not Ron's decision, but marketing promo execs. So yeah, that was that. This was totally different. This was a fan-driven explosion of frustration. What's cool is it was also organized in other cities, including globally. There was some in Chicago, in Orlando. New York City protested in the snow and went over to the Sci-Fi Channel, because one of the fever dreams was that Sci-Fi Channel would pick it up from UPN. Wasn't going to happen, but that was the dream. A rally in London. The New York was at Times Square. There was one in London, one in Tel Aviv, Israel. And back in the day, editing the Communicator, we had a sheet. We had photos from around the world. People emailed me their photos, pre-Facebook, everybody. So there were about 100 people at a time, maybe people coming and going 200. But what's amazing is, thanks to New Generation here, Restream on Tuesdays Live, let me show you a little bit about let me see how this looks. Boom. So this was a giant banner, and yes, there's me reporting for Communicator, also helping out my friend Sandy Golden Stone now, report for StarTrek.com. Kids, this is before everybody and their dog had a blog, much less their own YouTube show or their own podcast. So fandom media didn't exist. You had to lean on the entertainment. So here you go. Look who came by. So Tim Brazil was the guy in the middle here. Hold on to that name. Yours truly, Mike Sussman, Manny Cotto here, who was show running the last year, and of course Rod came by to see the fans and talk. Here's Rod and Manny talking. The picket signs were so clever. Here's another view of the front gate, right? And the picket signs. Can you read some of these? I love the one back here, Nielsen Schmielsen. Right. Save Enterprise. This is the top. Hey, Andy Bray, a year before I met you in the Spock's Brain live show at the Improv Comedy Store. A lot of you know Andy since then, but this is Andy holding the top half of the LA Times ad, Save Star Trek. And it was designed where you could take it with you. See? But right there at Windsor, J.G. Hertzler came by to bolster the crowd. There's the one we started with, the large banner. I love that sign, 18 years of loyalty, and this is the thanks we get. Yeah. There's the fivesome, Rod and Manny talking here. Some of these photos are from our friend John Lane at the time. Save Star Trek. Join us at www.trekunited.com, which is a domain that, since all of this, if you click on that now, it goes to our friends at the Federation, aka International Federation Trekkers, the old IFT. Now they go by the Federation. Big fan group with chapters. Manny was out front. There's a small version of the full page ad, talking to people, lots of photos, lots of picture taking going on. Jay Ju took video. I was thinking I'd love to see if he still has this video on his little 2005 digital video camera of the day. Anthony Montgomery came out, was the only one of the central regular cast of Enterprise who made it out. But he was diving into the fans and talking there. There was a bullhorn going around, which you can see. These these studio security people really weren't there. There was no trouble. Everything was civil. Everybody was, it was like the writing was on the wall, but people just wanted to sound off. So the cars were coming. They were here to keep people from blocking traffic and getting run over, either on Melrose, the street, or in and out of the main gate there. But they were also kind of there keeping an eye, make sure nobody roughed up Anthony or any of the other actors or notables that were there. But nothing happened. Nothing happened. Jeff Combs, as we now know, is infamously there doing Shran. Another one of Rod and Manny there with yours truly back doing my thing with my little Canon ELPH camera. No cameras on cell phones, kids. Or if they do, they were so pathetically low res. Manny got on the bullhorn and just basically thanked folks for their support. And we did have news crews and a story I'd forgotten about till I was reviewing notes. In the middle of all this, a Darth Vader and some stormtroopers showed up. Ha 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 ha. Well, turns out later on, the people I saw, we were just like, well, okay, somebody's just crashing for the attention. What it turned out was back in the day, G4 or Tech TV later had sent these guys over with the film crew tailing along behind them, ostensibly covering the but they wanted to see if there was some Star Trek, Star Wars, pushback animosity. Ooh, fan wars. Which, of course, is just total BS. It's all been clickbait for 30 years. These guys wound up just joining in the protest after a while. When they saw nothing was going to happen, there was like nobody with a Trek sign was allergic to Star Wars characters. Now, you'll notice that nobody on the Trek side protesting is wearing costumes or uniforms, anything. They had been specifically asked not to increase, the respectability cred. It's not a bunch of fan. This was right when things were turning. As the digital age got going, as the social media age got going, everybody looked around and realized that everybody was a fan and that the geeks won. They were all a fan of something. But this is one of the last gasps because it was a downtime. People were depressed about there was always supposed to be eternal Star Trek on TV now. We learned our lesson in the 70s. Why would it go away again? And so, yeah, there was some bittersweet, there was a bittersweet mood here, a down mood. But the last thing anybody was going to do was betray their Trekishness. So we were all in one boat. And people felt good for protesting, even though they pretty much knew it wasn't. The amazing thing about this also was, I wrote a piece for the Communicator. There was a woman and her husband from Brazil who had flown in from this. People from Canada, Australia, Germany, the UK had flown into LA just for this rally. Now, if there were a few more million people like that, maybe the story would have been different in the long run. But there you go. The big banner here. Here's Rod signing the big banner. I do believe that's Mr. Dave Rossi standing back there, who came out to report back to Rick Berman exactly what was going on. This is what the banner was. If you donated any amount of money, see, you got to leave your name in a comment. So the big Save Enterprise, this was so big. Remember when this was a big deal? You could print them out on your banner printer. The app for that. Another one of Rod talking to Tim Brazil here. News crew with the obviously with the boom mic there. But everything was so many handmade signs and all that. She got the attention of the local ABC affiliate news crew who were out there. The ABC, the CW's crew, Reuters news service was out. AM 640 News Radio was there. WWKD, What Would Kirk Do? It was 2005, gang. And then afterwards, that lasted till about 4:30. Afterwards, over to a neighborhood bar down the street. And Manny went over with a bunch of fans who didn't want to give up the day yet. They unrolled the banner. He's got a copy of the banner. They left it with him. unrolled it once again. People signed it. Some of the notables who'd come by during the day, some of the fans too. And he made sure and get it signed once again. So there you go. That's kind of the best of the photo album from that day. I did a piece in Communicator. Jonathan Lane, some of those photos were his. He did a piece on his blog. But other than that, and a little bit of TV, I found the LA Times story. It's still in their archive. Other than that, and about a month later, when the finale did air, there was a co-sponsor that basically Rod hosted and paid for. The closing comment of that day, aside from everybody thanking them for their support, the bullhorn made everybody feel like little activists with their protest. One of the closing comments was Rod thanking everybody. He said, look, as down as people were feeling, he said, look, Star Trek will never die. You won't let it die, which I'll always remember. And he said, look, no matter what happens, the Roddenberry family will never let you down. Because we were looking at who knew how long. This was a year before the JJ movie was announced, ST09. We didn't know it was a dark time. We felt so cheated and ripped. How could this happen? Didn't we learn our lesson? Didn't we show the world in the 70s? How is this allowed to happen? Who's responsible? And it was burnout. It was also, again, on the cusp of something amazing about to happen. Social media and DVRing, with right around the corner, binge watching. It was 5, 6, 7 years ago. Once again, Star Trek was almost on the cusp of being too good too soon, like 68, 69 again. But no, that was, 30 years? 30 years, no, 20 years. It'll be 20 years in 2 years. So this was 18 years ago. But it struck me writing that up that this was really the first. How did this get organized? 100 to 200 people was amazing. They weren't all locals. There were sister rallies around the country and around the world. It struck me that this was really the first time that a rally campaign got off paper, got off word of mouth, and had the burgeoning internet. Still early. Still, the term social media did not exist, but it was at the time seen as a failure. They didn't raise 30 million. They didn't get Paramount, and they didn't get UPN specifically, or Les Moonves, to turn around and renege the profit motive and see the value in keeping some Star Trek on. The website was, in support. StarTrek.com chugged along until the Viacom divorce screwed that up for 4 years. There was just a lot. It was a very transitory time. Everything was blowing up, right? Viacom divorce, the end of the Berman era. The world was changing. I got caught up in it. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. We had 5, 6 years there. We weren't just in the fallow times. We were in the wilderness, wondering how the world was going to settle if you were somehow attached to something like this. We eventually came out of the woods. It took 12 years to get Trek back on TV and a whole new business model that half of fandom was fighting against. But now here we are 7 years later, 6 years later, and we're getting it. And we see, not just for Star Trek, but we see the next way forward. Although that's even in flux too. How are you going to bundle your streaming apps, and what is just, are we just turning over from cable to streaming and the bills are going to be just as high? Well, that's all going to get settled out. And 10 episode seasons to have more cinematic, all of that is so different than it was in 2005. But I look back at this moment and think that was really the time when Star Trek fandom flexed its muscle, even in a small way, even in a failed way, but it got tons of attention. And did the mainstream media look at that as the last death throes, the death rattle of a once proud franchise that was going to go away, even as the world was changing, which is what some idiots were predicting in print? Or was it a harbor of things to come? Which is now which look back at it now and think. Now, the whole Save Star Trek, the whole Save Enterprise campaign famously got very controversial. After this, and by the time of the finale, it turned out that it was revealed that Paramount and UPN had told Tim in no uncertain terms, look, you can raise money till the cows come home, but this show is dead. It's almost exactly the same way NBC looked at Gene Roddenberry and said, this is dead, 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 in your best Trelane impersonation. People were pissed by April that fact hadn't been, that the campaigning went on. Now, was it scam? Was it fraud? No, I think it was just No, let's keep it up. Let's keep it up. We can't back down now. Was there some ego involved there? Sure. Was there some same thing happened when the FedCon, the hallowed FedCon convention in Germany was licensed in the US, and there was a FedCon USA convention held in Dallas? Not the best marketing thing, but middle of the country maybe, but it would wind up being a total flop with its 15, 20 guests. The place where all the guests, the thing Friday night opened and Saturday morning was canceled and then extended into the day before the airport hotel kicked everybody out. Wonderful memory I have with some John and Bonnie Billingsley, so many others that were there, and remember being told to shut down midway through a panel. That was wacky. And then everyone gathering. It's almost like a mini Con of Wrath. Okay, well, why wasn't that canceled when it was obvious there weren't enough bodies to fill it up? There were some dreams going on here. I just think, once again, sometimes the dream exceeds the grasp. The money was all returned, supposed to have been returned. In fact, Trek United, which was kind of absorbed by the Federation, was supposed to see to that. The $3 million that was individually pledged by 3 high-end individuals, which technically allowed them to say they'd raised over $3 million, they were pledges. Well, the pledges were never paid once the whole thing bubbled over. So that took care of itself. And a lot of people are very, very sore to this day about as you will see when you read the comments, it's been, what? I can't do math fast. 18 years. But some people still remember that end of it, where this went. But what I'm talking about today is the day when, for the first time maybe, there was a global response to something that fandom didn't like. Did they immediately make a change? No. But it showed people, and I'm not just talking about printing out big banners with signatures, making up the letters, but it showed what people were capable of. It showed there was a little life in the old girl yet. This franchise that people were proclaiming in the mainstream media and entertainment worlds. Oh, Star Trek's dead, and it'll be 10 or 20 years before it's recouped enough energy to come back. No. I mean, even if we're having fake universe movies for a while, getting a lot of attention and a lot of new fans, but we would eventually get back to it, and the world would reinvent itself, but we would eventually get back to having small screen weekly adventures again. And then some. 5 series in a year. Yeah, they're all short runs, but come on, 5 more animation, different points in the timeline. It's a fan's wet dream from the 90s. At least it's this one's. So maybe we will finally get that series set on Teller Prime or Star Trek West Wing. You see, and a lot of those fans and those folks, those pictures are still around with us today. Most of that was LA area fandom. Yes. I just like the first time fandom roared in a big way without stamps and paper. And I want to make sure, I saw so many folks saying they had no idea that existed. I just wanted to go back and point to it. I did have a couple things I wanted to highlight today, though. So Sandy Fries, who was a first season writer on The Next Generation, has some of his goodies up at an auction. Trek Core had a story here. You can go back and see several items. This is from February 26th. Alex did this story just a couple of days ago. This stuff here, these are Sandy's things, including his handwritten first draft for Coming of Age, right? Wesley takes his psych test. He's got some early Okudagram signage here that's in the lot, some call sheets and things related to it, and from his experience there. So check that out. The story, I will give you the, here's the, now this is the story, which will have more links. I think it's the simplest way. So shout out for Trek Core. Sure, I'll throw that at you. There's a link to the actual auction. Again, not all the auction items are Sandy's, but they're all historic things. The auctions come up from time to time now, but Sandy Fries, who was there in the beginning, has some first season Next Generation. Just the idea that he had the handwritten script here is amazing. I want to throw you over to that. But yeah, I wanted to leave you with that little history lesson. Hey, we're making tons of history right now. People are talking about Picard. We can talk about Picard. We can talk about... I hope you're watching our Second Opinion. Those are starting to get some traction. So as we think about that, here's the perfect chance to say not only Trekland Tuesdays Live, but hey, everybody who is in on my Patreon, you're helping with Second Opinion and basically spread the reach of Trekland Media, my channel, all over. So here's this week's weekly shout out to everybody in the TTL Club, our Patreons like Diana Hopkins, Robin Wilson, Lawrence Todd, and Marie Siegel, Justin Porteous, Glinda Bruton. Chris Jiggins, you're the newest member up here. So Andrew Juzemski, Pranakasha Productions, and Gay Clevin Lundstrom, and our live wires, Halbert Gunn Johnson, Robert McLean, Alan Hoensi, J.R. Poole, Byron Bailey, Dave Gregory, and Casey Shafsky. There you go. If you'd like to jump in, I keep it very simple. Maybe I should make it bigger, but for right now, everything going on, we keep it down to $5 and $10. Patreon.com/TreklandLive. You might see somebody else you want to support when you're at Patreon, maybe. Have at it. Have at it. They do that at the end of the month. Today's the end of the month. If you want to jump in right now and help us out, you can. But the burgeoning coming of Second Opinion is another brick in the wall here of building our streaming outreach, which is getting off beyond paper and stamps, which we haven't done in ages. Anyway, gang, I just want to remind you this week that the Trek Files, my podcast for Roddenberry, is still in hiatus. We're going to be coming back for our 10th season later next month, next month still. So check it out. But 9 years of back catalog is still there, including 4 of the last 5 we just did with Dave Blass, production designer in Picard, and Terry Matalas, the showrunner on Star Trek Picard Season 3, especially. You're enjoying Picard. You want to get there. Podcast.roddenberry.com is where all the podcasts are for Roddenberry. We're at the Trek Files with the documents, or you can get the audio anywhere. But you want to get the documents and see the cool stuff that we talk about. We're the only podcast with homework. So here we are. The mysteries of Picard are unfolding every week. It's a great time to be a fan. More will be on the way when Picard's over. Again, follow the socials. Follow Dave and Terry and so many more on the teams. Doug Drexler's, Okuda's are reposting so many Easter eggs, and it's just not even Easter eggs, deeper levels of what they did for these shows. It's the great old days where they know, even if it's not on camera, and a lot of it isn't, check out Jim Martin's new Tongo game that was in Sneed's Ferengi Den of Iniquity on Metalis Prime in District 6. District 6 will never be quite the same term, and it's going to be up there like Starbase 80. But a lot of fun. I hope you're able to watch Picard right now. It's pretty effing amazing. But right now, we're going to take our leave. If you want to follow me, you know what it is. It's Larry Nemecek on Twitter and Instagram. It's Larry Nemecek's Trekland, where you're watching right now. Especially go like us and subscribe on YouTube if you can. And Instagram. Portal47.net. Yes, it's your mini-con all year long, in between the cons and the cruise and whatever virtual is happening that weekend. If you are watching us later right now on YouTube, try to come by and watch us live. We just ended a great sale at our TeePublic store. TeePublic sets those up randomly. So you might want to catch that if you want some swag for any of our brands and things. But some Cadet Alice stuff is very cute and pink, I should say. Otherwise, it's been great to be with you for Tuesday. Join us live if you can. Subscribe if you're here watching later. And check out the Second Opinions and some new Cadet Alice coming soon. Come on. Until then, do all the things, right? Stay healthy. Just common sense stuff these days. And don't knock those who are looking out for themselves the way they need to. Okay, let everybody, my God, if we can't let everybody take care of themselves the way they feel like it, what are we? Oh, yeah, the root cause of half the other issues of the world. But let's do it anyway, okay? And I say stay woke. I mean, check your sources and be open to the information that they never told you, okay? I guess I'm saying, truck well, everybody.